I took my daughter's phone to my old friend, a technician, to have it repaired. He suddenly pulled me aside, his face pale, and whispered, "Cancel all your cards immediately, change your passwords, and get out of here." I was surprised. What happened? He turned the phone screen toward me and, before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The kitchen fell silent the moment I stepped through the door. Emily and Kevin had been huddled over the counter, speaking in those urgent whispers that people use when they're planning something they shouldn't. But the second they heard my keys in the lock, they sprang apart like guilty teenagers caught smoking behind the school. "Dad?" Emily's smile was so forced it could have cracked porcelain. "How was the doctor?" "Fine. Blood pressure's good." I set my jacket on the chair, watching them. Kevin had his phone clutched in his hand, screen dark now, but his thumb was still hovering over it like he'd just locked it in a hurry. Emily was nervously tucking her hair behind her ear, a tell she'd had since childhood whenever she was hiding something. "That's great," she said too brightly. Then, barely pausing for breath, "Hey, Dad, I have a huge favor to ask. My phone—" She held up her iPhone, and I could see the spiderweb of cracks across the screen. "I dropped it this morning, and I really need it for work. Could you take it to your friend Daniel, the repair guy you always talk about?" I looked at the phone, then at her face. There was something in her eyes I couldn't quite place. Anxiety? Desperation? "Sure, honey. I can drop it off tomorrow." "Actually—" Kevin stepped forward, and I caught a flash of impatience in his expression before he smoothed it over. "She really needs it back as soon as possible. Like today, if you could? Some important work stuff coming up." It was barely 2 in the afternoon. "I suppose I could go now?" "Thank you." Emily practically shoved the phone into my hands. "You're the best?" "The best." "Right. I'd heard that a lot over the years, usually when they needed something." That evening, dinner was a masterclass in discomfort. I'd made my specialty, pot roast with vegetables, the same meal I used to make every Sunday when Emily was young. She barely touched it. Kevin, my son-in-law, ate mechanically while scrolling through his laptop with his free hand. "You know, Richard," Kevin said without looking up, "this whole cooking every night thing, it's very quaint. But most people our age just use meal delivery services." "Most people your age don't have someone cooking for them for free," I replied, keeping my tone light. He finally glanced at me, and I saw that familiar flicker of condescension in his eyes. "I'm just saying, the world's moved on. Paper bills, cooking from scratch, keeping everything in filing cabinets. It's all very 20th century. Emily jumped in quickly. "Kevin just means that technology makes things easier, Dad. That's all." "Right, easier." I took a bite of pot roast. It was actually quite good, if I did say so myself. "How's the job search going, Kevin?" His jaw tightened. He'd been between opportunities for about 8 months now. "I've got some leads. Nothing concrete yet. I'm sure something will turn up." I didn't mention that those leads never seemed to materialize, or that I'd been covering their share of groceries and utilities for longer than I cared to calculate. After dinner, I sat in the living room, my living room, in the house I'd bought 30 years ago when mortgage rates were through the roof, and I'd worked double shifts to make the payments. The leather armchair still bore the indent from where I'd sat thousands of evenings, reading the paper, doing crosswords, living my life. Now I sat there like a guest in my own home. On the mantel were photographs. Emily as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, holding up a fish we'd caught on our camping trip. Emily at her college graduation, beaming with pride. Emily and Kevin's wedding, where she'd whispered, "I'm so happy, Dad," as we walked down the aisle. When had everything changed? I picked up the photo from her graduation. I'd been so proud that day. My daughter, the first in our family to get a degree. I'd worked extra hours, saved every penny I could to help with her tuition. She'd hugged me so tight and promised she'd make me proud. Now she couldn't meet my eyes at dinner. I heard them upstairs, their voices muffled but urgent. Not arguing exactly, but discussing something intense. Planning something. The floorboards creaked as one of them paced back and forth. I looked at Emily's cracked phone sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it. I should have taken it to Daniel right away, but something had stopped me. Some instinct I couldn't name. The house felt cold tonight, despite the Florida heat outside. Cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. This was my home, the place where I'd raised Emily after her mother passed, where every room held memories. But lately it felt like I was the outsider here. They'd moved in 5 years ago, just for a couple of months, Dad, until we find our own place. That's what Emily had said. I'd just retired from my accounting firm, and honestly, I'd welcomed the company. The house had felt too empty after decades of living alone. But months had turned into years, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a father they loved and started being an obstacle they tolerated. I ran my thumb over the cracked screen of Emily's phone. Tomorrow, I'd take it to Daniel. Tonight, I'd sit in my chair and wonder when I'd become a stranger in my own life. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 in the morning, I found myself back in the living room, this time pulling out the old photo albums from the cabinet. Maybe I was being sentimental, or maybe I was trying to pinpoint exactly when things had shifted. 5 years ago, when Emily and Kevin had arrived with their suitcases and hopeful smiles, I'd been genuinely happy. I'd spent the previous 2 years rattling around this 4-bedroom house by myself, and the idea of having family close again had warmed something in me that had been cold since my wife died. That first month had been wonderful. We'd had dinners together every night, real dinners, with conversation and laughter. Emily would tell me about her marketing job, Kevin about his plans for a startup. They'd ask about my retirement, my golf game, the garden I was planning. We'd watch movies on Friday nights, the three of us crowded on the couch with popcorn like Emily and I used to do when she was young. I remember the exact moment I started to feel the shift. It was about 6 months in. I'd come home from the grocery store and found Kevin in my study, sitting at my desk with my filing cabinet open. Papers were spread across the surface, bank statements, insurance documents, my will. "What are you doing?" I'd asked, trying to keep my voice level. He'd jumped slightly, then recovered with that easy smile. "Oh, hey, Richard. Emily mentioned you were having trouble organizing your tax documents. I thought I'd help out. I used to do some bookkeeping in college." It had seemed reasonable at the time, helpful even, so I'd thanked him and let it go. But now looking back, I remembered the way he'd quickly shuffled the papers together, the way his explanation had come just a beat too quickly, the way Emily had been oddly insistent that I didn't need to hire an accountant that year, that Kevin could help out. Then there was the incident about a year ago with the bank statement. I'd been cleaning out the mail basket and found a credit card statement addressed to me, from a company I'd never done business with. The balance was $3,047.50. I'd stared at it, confused, then taken it to Emily. "Dad, that's so weird," she'd said, barely glancing at it. "Must be identity theft or something. Happens all the time these days. I'll call the bank for you and get it sorted out." "I can call them myself." No, I know how much you hate being on hold with customer service. Plus, I deal with this stuff at work all the time. Let me handle it." She'd taken the statement from my hands and promised to take care of it. I never saw it again, and when I asked about it a week later, she'd assured me it was all handled. Just a computer glitch. I'd believed her because I wanted to believe her, because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and the alternative, that she was lying to me, was unthinkable. But there had been other moments, too, small things that hadn't seemed important at the time. 3 months ago, I'd walked into the kitchen and found Kevin photographing my driver's license. "Just helping Emily update the insurance," he'd said. "They needed a copy of all our IDs. Last month, I'd gotten a call from my bank about a password reset I hadn't requested. When I mentioned it to Emily, she'd said she'd accidentally used my email instead of hers and quickly fixed it. 2 weeks ago, I'd found an envelope on the counter addressed to me, from a mortgage company. I'd almost opened it when Emily had snatched it away. "That's nothing, Dad. Just spam. They send these to everyone." Each incident alone had seemed innocent, but together they formed a pattern I'd been too trusting, or too naive, to see. I closed the photo album and stared at the ceiling. In the silence of 3 a.m., the truth was harder to avoid. My daughter and her husband were hiding something from me, something big enough to make them nervous, something that involved my personal documents and my finances. The thing about being an accountant for 40 years is that you learn to spot discrepancies, numbers that don't add up, stories that don't quite match the ledgers. And right now, living in my own house, I was seeing discrepancies everywhere. Kevin hadn't worked in 8 months, yet I'd seen him with new shoes, a new watch. Emily had mentioned struggling with money, yet she'd just gotten her nails done and talked about wanting to redecorate their room. Where was the money coming from? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet Orlando street. The house across from me, the Hendersons' place, was dark. Jerry Henderson and I used to have beers on Friday evenings, talking about retirement, fishing, grandkids we hoped to have someday. Then Jerry had passed away last year, and his kids had swooped in like vultures, selling the place within a month. His daughter hadn't even bothered to visit him in his last 6 months, but she'd sure shown up for the will reading. I'd thought then, at least Emily isn't like that. At least I raised her better. Had I, though? The realization came slowly, like water seeping through a crack. I wasn't just uncomfortable in my own home. I was afraid. Afraid of what I might discover if I looked too closely. Afraid that the daughter I loved, the little girl I'd raised alone after her mother died, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, afraid that she might be betraying me in ways I couldn't yet fully imagine. Tomorrow, I'd take the phone to Daniel. Tonight, I'd make a decision. I would stop being willfully blind. I would stop accepting convenient explanations. I would stop being the trusting fool they clearly thought I was. Because whatever was happening, whatever they were hiding, I was going to find out. And if my instincts were right, if my daughter and her husband were doing what I suspected, then they were about to learn something important. You don't spend 40 years balancing books and catching fraud without learning how to spot a scheme. And you don't get to be 67 years old by being someone's easy mark. I went back to bed with my jaw set and my mind clear. I still didn't know what I'd find at Daniel's shop tomorrow. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done pretending everything was fine. The game, whatever it was about to change. Daniel's repair shop sat on a quiet street in downtown Orlando, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a coffee shop that made the best espresso in the city. I'd been coming here for years, first as his father's accountant, then as a friend, and finally as a customer who trusted him with everything from laptops to phones. The bell chimed as I pushed through the door. Daniel looked up from behind the counter, his reading glasses perched on his nose, and broke into a genuine smile, not the tight fake one I'd been getting at home. "Richard, good to see you, man. What brings you in?" I held up Emily's phone. "My daughter's screen. She dropped it yesterday." "Ah." He took it from me, examining the spiderweb of cracks. "Yeah, I can fix this. Give me about an hour to run diagnostics and order the part if I need it." "Sounds good. I'll grab a coffee and come back." I spent the next 20 minutes at the shop next door, nursing an Americano and watching people pass by on the sidewalk. Normal people doing normal things. Going to work, running errands, living lives that probably didn't involve their own children stealing from them. Then my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, that was fast. Richard," his voice was tight, urgent. "You need to come back here, now." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Just, please, come now." I left my coffee half finished and was back at the shop in under 2 minutes. Daniel was waiting at the door. He locked it behind me and flipped the "back in 15 minutes" sign. "Daniel, what the—" He cut me off, leading me to the back room where he did his more detailed work. Emily's phone lay on the workbench, screen facing up. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "Look, I always run a virus scan before I do repairs. Standard procedure, right? Make sure there's no malware that might corrupt the new hardware." He picked up the phone. "I found something. And, Richard, you need to cancel your credit cards immediately. Change all your passwords. And honestly, you might want to call the police." The room tilted slightly. "What are you talking about?" He unlocked the phone. Apparently he'd already bypassed the security and opened the photo gallery. "I'm sorry you have to see this." The first image was a photograph of my passport. Clear, well lit, every detail visible. He swiped to the next image, my social security card. Next, my driver's license front and back. Next, 3 different credit cards, photographed from both sides. Next, bank statements with my account numbers clearly visible. Next, tax documents with my signature. And then the screenshots started. Text messages between 2 contacts, saved as E and K. "Credit app submitted. Should be approved by Friday." "Perfect. The old man hasn't noticed anything yet. I told you he wouldn't. He's too trusting. 2 more months and we can move on the house. I found a realtor who'll work fast. We need to be careful. If he catches on before we're ready, he won't. He barely understands how to check his email. I read them all. Every single message. There were dozens. Months of planning, scheming, discussing how to forge my signature digitally, which credit card companies had the easiest online applications, how much they could drain before I'd notice. Daniel stood beside me, silent. What could he say? My hands were shaking. I set the phone down carefully, afraid I might throw it against the wall. How long? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant. How long have they been doing this? Based on the timestamps, at least 6 months, maybe longer. Daniel's face was pale. Richard, I'm so sorry. I know she's your daughter, but this is identity theft. Fraud. This is serious. 6 months. Half a year of systematically photographing my documents, applying for credit in my name, planning to sell my house out from under me, all while living under my roof, eating my food, accepting my help. The old man hasn't noticed anything yet. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, clearer. Can you make copies of everything? I asked. Already did. Backed up the whole phone to an encrypted drive. I figured. He hesitated. I figured you'd need evidence. Good thinking. I pulled out my own phone. I need to make some calls. The police station was only 10 minutes away. Detective Margaret Thompson arrived at the shop within the hour, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked at the evidence with increasing concern. Mr. Foster, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Family fraud cases are complicated. We can investigate, and we will, but proving intent can be difficult, even with these messages. What about the applications? The credit cards opened in my name? We'll need to get records from the banks. It'll take time. And honestly, she met my eyes. Even with solid evidence, juries can be sympathetic to family members. Oh, they were just helping their father, that kind of thing. I understood what she wasn't saying. This was going to be messy, difficult, possibly unsuccessful. But we will investigate, she continued. I'll need you to file a formal report. We'll start pulling financial records, contacting the credit bureaus. We spent the next 2 hours at the station. I gave my statement, signed forms, authorized the police to access my financial information. The detective was thorough, professional, but I could see the sympathy in her eyes, and I hated it. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted justice. By the time I left, the sun was setting. I sat in my car in the station parking lot and let myself feel it, the full weight of what Emily and Kevin had done. Not just the theft, the betrayal, the casual cruelty of those text messages. The old man? Like I was just some obstacle, some resource to be exploited. My daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, put through college, the woman who'd promised at her wedding that she'd always loved me. She'd been robbing me blind for 6 months. And Kevin, that smug, condescending parasite who lived in my house and made jokes about my old-fashioned ways while photographing my documents and forging my signature. I started the car. Time to go home. Time to face them, knowing what I now knew, pretending I was still the clueless old man they thought I was. Because Detective Thompson was right. This was going to be complicated. But she'd also said something else, almost as an afterthought. Document everything from now on. Every interaction, every suspicious behavior. Build your case. Oh, I would document everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every condescending comment. They thought they were so clever. They thought I was too old, too trusting, too stupid to catch on. We'd see about that. I drove home slowly, my mind racing despite the careful pace. Numbers had always been my comfort zone. 40 years of accounting had trained me to see patterns, to find the story hidden in ledgers and receipts. Now my brain was doing what it did best, organizing, categorizing, connecting dots. The strange credit card statement from a year ago that Emily had handled. The bank password reset she'd claimed was an accident. Kevin photographing my driver's license for insurance. The mortgage company envelope she'd snatched away. Every incident, now reframed through the lens of deliberate theft rather than innocent mistakes. The picture wasn't just clearer, it was damning. I pulled into the driveway. Their cars were both there. Of course they were. Where else would they be? They lived here, rent-free, in the house I'd worked myself half to death to buy. "Dad!" Emily called from the kitchen as I entered, too cheerful. "How did it go? Can Daniel fix the phone?" I hung my keys on the hook, the same hook I'd installed 30 years ago, and walked into the kitchen. They were both there, Emily at the counter slicing vegetables, Kevin at the table with his laptop. "He needs to order a part," I said calmly. "Said it'll be a week, maybe 2. Some special component has to come from overseas." Emily's face twitched, just the slightest frown before she recovered. "Oh, that's a long time." "Technology," I said with a shrug. "You know how it is. These phones are so complicated now." Kevin didn't even look up from his screen. "Told you to just buy a new one, Em. But no, you had to try to save money." The irony was almost funny. Kevin, who hadn't worked in 8 months, lecturing about saving money while stealing mine. I made myself a sandwich and sat at the table, watching them. Really watching them, the way I should have been all along. Emily's hands were unsteady as she cut the vegetables. She kept glancing at Kevin, then at me, then back to her cutting board. Kevin's laptop screen was angled away from me, but I caught a glimpse of what looked like a spreadsheet, numbers in columns, calculating something. "Everything okay, Dad?" Emily asked. "You seem quiet. Just tired. Long day." I took a bite of my sandwich. "Say, Kevin, I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about selling the house." Kevin's fingers paused on the keyboard. "Oh? Yeah, maybe you're right. This place is getting to be a lot for one person." I watched his face carefully. "I mean, for one old person. You two probably aren't staying forever, right? Eventually you'll want your own place." Emily and Kevin exchanged a glance. Quick, but I caught it. "We're in no rush to leave," Emily said quickly. "We like being here with you." "Well, that's sweet, honey. But still, I've been thinking I should probably talk to a financial advisor. Get my affairs in order, you know. I'm not getting any younger." Kevin's attention was fully on me now. "That's actually smart thinking, Richard. Very responsible." Responsible. From the man who'd been forging my signature for months. "I might even update my will," I continued casually. "Make sure everything's clear. You know, just in case." "Dad, don't talk like that," Emily said, but her eyes were bright with something that wasn't sadness. After dinner, I excused myself early. Upstairs, I closed my bedroom door and pulled out my phone. Daniel had given me a flash drive with all the evidence before I left. Now I needed to figure out what to do with it. Detective Thompson had been clear. They'd investigate, but it would take time. Weeks, maybe months, and family fraud was notoriously difficult to prosecute. But I hadn't spent 4 decades in accounting without learning a thing or two about building cases. Every audit I'd ever done had taught me the same lesson. Documentation was everything. Create a paper trail. Make the numbers irrefutable. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Evidence. Then I started listing every suspicious incident I could remember, dating back 5 years. The credit card, the bank calls, the photographed license, the insurance documents, the mysterious envelope. Alongside each incident, I noted what I'd been told at the time versus what I now knew. Told, technical bank error. Reality, fraudulent credit card in my name. Told, helping with insurance. Reality, photographing ID for identity theft. Told, just spam mail. Reality, mortgage refinancing application I never authorized. The list grew longer, pattern after pattern after pattern. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "You okay, man?" I typed back. "Been better. Thanks for today." "Anytime. Let me know if you need anything." I stared at his message. Then I typed, "Actually, how long can you realistically delay that phone repair?" The response came quickly. "As long as you need. I can say the part's back-ordered. Manufacturer delays, whatever. Week? 2 weeks? 2 weeks would be perfect. Done." I set the phone down and returned to my laptop. 2 weeks without Emily having access to her phone meant 2 weeks where she couldn't coordinate as easily with Kevin. 2 weeks where they'd be anxious, off balance. 2 weeks for me to prepare. I pulled up my bank accounts. All of them, including the ones I'd kept separate for years. The investments I'd made, the retirement fund I'd built. My assets totaled considerably more than Emily and Kevin probably realized. That credit card statement they'd manipulated, That $180,000 I'd accidentally mentioned once, they thought they knew my financial situation. They had no idea. A plan was forming. Not just prosecution. Detective Thompson was right that convictions could be uncertain. But there were other kinds of justice. Financial justice. Legal justice. The kind that came from understanding systems and using them properly. I'd spent my career finding discrepancies, catching fraud, protecting assets. Now I'd protect my own. Downstairs, I could hear Emily and Kevin talking in hushed voices, worried voices. They were probably trying to figure out how to proceed without her phone for 2 weeks. Good. Let them worry. I opened a new browser tab and searched for criminal defense attorneys in Orlando. Then I reconsidered and searched instead for attorneys who specialized in financial fraud cases, but on the prosecution side. I needed someone who understood how these schemes worked, who could anticipate their moves. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls. Detective Thompson had mentioned that building a solid case took time and strategy. Well, I had time. And after 40 years of building airtight audits, I certainly had strategy. Emily had called me the old man who wouldn't notice. Kevin had mocked my old-fashioned ways. They were about to learn that old-fashioned accounting principles still worked just fine. And one of the first principles I'd learned, way back when I started, always balance your books. Every debit requires a credit. Every action has a consequence. They'd taken from me. Now it was time to calculate exactly what they owed, and I wasn't just thinking about money. I closed my laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since seeing those photos on Emily's phone, I felt something other than shock or pain. I felt focused. They'd made a mistake underestimating me, and I was going to make absolutely certain they understood the full cost of that error. The next morning, over coffee that tasted like ash in my mouth, I played my role perfectly. "So, Dad," Emily said with studied casualness, "any update from Daniel?" I looked up from my newspaper. Yes, I still read actual newspapers, much to Kevin's amusement, and shrugged. He called last night. Needs to order a part from overseas. Could be a week, maybe 2. Emily's smile flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. 2 weeks? You know how it is with these fancy smartphones. Everything's proprietary now. I turned back to my paper. I remember when phones were just phones. You dropped them. The plastic case cracked. You bought a new case for $5. Now it's like performing surgery. Kevin snorted from across the table. That's the problem with your generation, Richard. Always complaining about progress instead of adapting. I could have pointed out that his generation couldn't seem to adapt to the concept of paying rent or holding down a job. But I just smiled mildly. You're probably right, Kevin. The look he exchanged with Emily was priceless. Confusion mixed with satisfaction. They thought they were winning. Over the next few days, I became a student of their behavior. 40 years of auditing had taught me that people revealed themselves in patterns, and Emily and Kevin were practically screaming their guilt if you knew what to look for. Kevin spent hours on his laptop in the corner of the living room, angled so I couldn't see the screen. But I'd catch glimpses when I walked by. Spreadsheets, numbers, calculations, planning how to spend money that wasn't his. Emily made calls constantly. She'd say she was checking on work stuff and step outside. But through the window, I'd see her texting rapidly, her shoulders hunched with tension. They'd become secretive about everything. Their bedroom door was always locked now. They whispered in corners. They'd stop talking mid-sentence if I entered a room. The funny thing, they probably thought they were being subtle. On the 3rd day after my discovery, I had my first meeting with Gerald Morris. Detective Thompson had given me his name. He specializes in financial fraud cases, she'd said. If anyone can help you build a bulletproof strategy, it's Gerald. His office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture that probably cost more than my first car. Gerald himself was in his late 50s, with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen every scheme in the book. "Mr. Foster," he shook my hand firmly, "Detective Thompson briefed me on your situation. I've reviewed the evidence from the phone. It's comprehensive. Is it enough? For criminal charges, absolutely. For conviction," he tilted his head, "that depends. Juries can be unpredictable, especially in family cases. But what concerns me more is that you don't just want justice. You want something more, don't you? I sat back in the leather chair. I want them to understand what they did. Not just legally, but emotionally. I want them to feel the betrayal, the helplessness, the shock of having everything pulled out from under them. The way I felt when I saw those messages calling me the old man. Gerald nodded slowly. Then we need to be strategic. Criminal prosecution is one avenue, but we need to think bigger. Civil liability, asset protection. We need to make them feel the consequences in ways they'll understand, financially, legally, socially. I'm listening. First, we need to let them continue. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if we shut them down now, they can claim it was just one or two mistakes, impulse decisions. If we document a clear pattern of systematic fraud over time, their intent becomes undeniable. You want me to watch them steal from me? Under controlled conditions, yes. We'll work with Detective Thompson. Every fraudulent application, every forged signature, every credit line they open, it's all evidence. And more importantly, it's more debt they'll be responsible for when this is over. I thought about it. The accountant in me understood the logic. Document everything. Build an airtight case. Let them dig their own grave with spreadsheets and signatures. What else? Gerald pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out a plan. We need to protect your actual assets. New will, power of attorney with specific limitations, trusts if necessary. Make sure that no matter what they try legally, they can't touch your real money. They're planning to sell my house. Not if we file the right documents first. We'll create a revocable living trust, transfer the house into it. Even if they somehow get guardianship, which they won't, they can't touch trust property without going through specific legal channels that take months. By the time they realized what happened, it would be too late. I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Not the desperate kind, but the cold, calculated kind that comes with a solid plan. There's one more thing, Gerald said, leaning forward. We need to think about civil damages. Criminal court might send them to jail, but civil court can make them pay. Literally. Emotional distress, attempted theft, fraud. We can build a substantial claim. How substantial? Based on what I'm seeing, easily 6 figures. Maybe more, depending on what else we find. I left his office 3 hours later with a stack of documents to sign and a timeline for action. Gerald's paralegal would start filing paperwork immediately. The trust, the new will, the power of attorney restrictions, all of it would be in place within a week. That evening at dinner, Kevin was particularly smug. You know, Richard, Emily and I have been talking. We think you should consider getting a financial advisor. Someone to help manage your accounts. Make sure you're not getting taken advantage of. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with my fork. That's thoughtful of you, Kevin. But I've managed my own finances for 40 years. I think I'm okay. That's exactly the point, Dad. Emily's voice was sticky sweet with false concern. You've been doing it for so long. Maybe it's time to let someone else take some of the burden. We worry about you. They worried about me. Right. They worried I might notice the fraudulent credit cards before they could drain them completely. I'll think about it, I said, and watched them exchange another one of those looks. Later that night, alone in my room, I reviewed Gerald's plan again. It was elegant in its completeness. Every angle covered, every loophole closed, every trap set. They thought they were the hunters. They thought they'd found an easy mark in their aging father who still read paper newspapers and didn't understand modern technology. What they didn't understand was that technology might change, but human nature doesn't. Greed is still greed. Fraud is still fraud. And consequences, well, consequences are timeless. I pulled out my phone and texted Gerald. I'm in. Let's do this. His response came immediately. Remember, you need to maintain that poker face. Can you do that? I smiled at the screen and typed back, I've been practicing for 40 years. The game was on, and this time I knew all the rules. Detective Thompson came to the house on a Tuesday afternoon while Emily and Kevin were out. She'd called ahead, making sure they wouldn't be home. In her hands was a manila folder that looked deceptively thin for the bomb it contained. Coffee? I offered. Please. She settled into the kitchen chair and opened the folder. Richard, the bank forensics came back. It's worse than we thought. I poured us both coffee and sat down. How much worse? 3 credit cards opened in your name. Total available credit. $45,000, two personal loans totaling $30,000, and here's the kicker. There's a pending application for a cash-out refinance on this house. If it had gone through, they would have extracted about $200,000 in equity. My hands tightened on the coffee mug. $200,000, nearly everything I'd built over 30 years of work. How much have they actually spent so far? About $20,000. The rest is still available credit. They've been careful, spacing out the charges so nothing would trigger fraud alerts. Mostly cash advances and wire transfers. She slid some documents across the table. Every signature is forged. Digital signatures created from scans of your real signature from other documents. I studied the paperwork, the applications, the loan documents, the credit card agreements, all bearing my name, none bearing my actual consent. The handwriting expert confirmed it? I asked. Confirmed. These are sophisticated forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Richard, with this evidence, we have them cold. Identity theft, financial fraud, forgery, multiple felonies. We could arrest them today. No. The word came out harder than I intended. Not yet. Thompson raised an eyebrow. Your attorney explained the strategy? He did. Let them continue under surveillance. Build the pattern. Make the case undeniable. It's risky. Every day we wait, they could do more damage. Controlled damage, I corrected. Gerald is setting up protection for my real assets. Let them think they're winning. Let them get comfortable. And let them hang themselves with more evidence. She nodded slowly. Your call. But Richard, be careful. Cornered animals can be dangerous. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at those forged signatures, each one a betrayal, each one proof that my daughter had looked at me and seen only an ATM machine with a heartbeat. The front door opened around 4. Emily and Kevin back from wherever they'd been. Dad? Emily called out. You home? Kitchen, I replied. They came in carrying shopping bags, new clothes, I noticed, expensive brands, bought with money stolen from me, though they didn't know I knew that yet. We were thinking, Kevin said, settling into a chair with that casual arrogance of his. Maybe it's time we talked about long-term plans for the house. What about it? Well, it's a big place. 4 bedrooms, that huge yard, a lot of maintenance for one person. He leaned back, completely at ease. Have you thought about downsizing? Maybe one of those nice retirement communities? Emily jumped in. We're not trying to push you out, Dad. We just want you to be comfortable. And financially, it might make sense. Free up some equity, reduce your expenses. I looked at them. Really looked at them. Emily with her new designer purse, Kevin with his confident smirk. Both of them so certain they had me fooled. You know, I said slowly, you might be right. I have been thinking about my financial situation lately. Kevin perked up. Really? Mm-hmm. In fact, I've been reviewing all my accounts, making sure everything's in order. Updating my will, that sort of thing. The change in them was instantaneous. Emily's smile froze. Kevin's eyes sharpened with something that might have been alarm. Your will? Emily's voice was carefully controlled. Is everything okay? Are you sick? No, nothing like that. Just being responsible. At my age, you never know. I stood and started cleaning my coffee mug. I actually met with a lawyer last week, Gerald Morris. He specializes in estate planning. The silence behind me was deafening. I could practically feel their panic. That's good, Kevin finally managed. Smart thinking. I thought so. He's helping me set up some trusts, reorganize my assets, making sure everything's protected and properly allocated. I turned to face them, keeping my expression mild. He said I've been leaving myself vulnerable to potential fraud. Apparently, identity theft is a big problem for seniors these days. Emily's face had gone pale. Not dramatically. She was better at controlling herself than Kevin, but I saw the color drain from her cheeks. Her hand moved to her phone in her pocket, an unconscious gesture. Kevin, on the other hand, couldn't quite manage his expression. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted to Emily, then back to me. The shopping bags in his hands crinkled as his grip tightened. Identity theft? He said. That's serious. Very serious. Gerald said that family members are often the most vulnerable to it. People trust their relatives, don't protect their information properly. I opened the dishwasher and placed my mug inside. Anyway, he's setting up all sorts of protections. New passwords, alerts on all my accounts, security measures. It said it'll make it nearly impossible for anyone to access my information without my explicit permission. Emily and Kevin stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. I could see their minds racing, calculating, trying to figure out if I knew. If this was a coincidence or a declaration of war. "Well," Emily said finally, her voice too high. "That sounds very thorough, Dad." "I thought so. Oh, and Daniel called. Your phone's ready. You can pick it up tomorrow." If possible, Emily went even paler. Her phone. With all the evidence. She didn't know Daniel had already copied everything, that the police had every message, every photo. "That's great," she whispered. "That's really great." They excused themselves shortly after that, claiming they had errands to run. I watched them go, saw Kevin's hand on Emily's back, guiding her quickly out the door. Through the window, I could see them in the driveway, having an intense, whispered argument, before finally getting in the car and driving away. I pulled out my phone and texted Detective Thompson. "They're spooked. Just mentioned the lawyer and new security measures. You should see increased activity on the account soon." Her response was almost immediate. "We're watching. Every move is being documented." I leaned against the counter and let myself smile. Really smile. For the first time since this nightmare began. The look on Kevin's face when I'd mentioned fraud protection. The way Emily's hand had flown to her phone. The panic poorly disguised as casual concern. It was better than any spreadsheet I'd ever balanced. They were rattled now, uncertain. They'd thought they had months to execute their plan. Now they'd be rushing, making mistakes, leaving more evidence. Perfect. 2 weeks crawled by like years. Emily asked about her phone almost daily, each inquiry more anxious than the last. "Still no word from Daniel?" she'd ask, trying to sound casual and failing. "These things take time, honey," I'd reply, not looking up from my crossword puzzle. "International shipping, you know." On the 15th day, I called her into the living room. "Good news. Daniel just called. Your phone's ready. You can pick it up today." The relief that flooded her face was almost comical. She and Kevin exchanged one of their meaningful glances, the kind they thought I didn't notice, and I saw her shoulders drop as tension drained away. "That's great, Dad. I'll go get it right now." "Take your time," I said mildly. "He's there until 6. She was out the door in under 5 minutes. That evening I sat in my usual chair in the living room, reading, or pretending to read anyway. Emily and Kevin had retreated to their room, and their voices drifted down through the old house's thin walls. "Finally!" Kevin's voice louder than he probably intended. "I thought that old fool had lost it." "Shh," Emily hissed. "He'll hear you." "He's half-deaf anyway," Kevin replied. "Look, we need to move fast now. The phone was out of commission for 2 weeks. We're behind schedule." Their voices dropped to urgent whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear enough. Desperation, greed, calculation. I sat very still, hands clenched on my book, and reminded myself that Detective Thompson was watching, that every move they made from here on out was being documented, that justice was coming, but it didn't make it hurt any less. The next morning, I executed the next phase of Gerald's plan. On the kitchen counter, seemingly forgotten, I left a bank statement. Not from one of my regular accounts. They already knew about those. This was from an investment account I'd maintained for years, one I'd never mentioned. The balance showed $180,000. I went out to the garden, ostensibly to check on my tomato plants, but positioned where I could see through the kitchen window. Emily came down first. She walked past the statement, stopped, backed up, picked it up. Her eyes widened as she read the numbers. Kevin appeared moments later. She showed him, and I watched his face transform. Greed replacing suspicion, dollar signs practically visible in his eyes. They thought they'd hit the jackpot. What they didn't know was that the account was real, but I had already moved the money. What sat in that account now was $180,000 of bait, and the second they tried to access it, alarms would go off at 3 different banks and the police department. That evening, Kevin was almost friendly at dinner. "You know, Richard, you've done really well for yourself. Built up a nice nest egg." "I've been careful," I agreed. "Lived below my means, invested wisely." "That's smart," Emily chimed in. "Very smart. Have you thought about what you'll do with it all? I mean, eventually?" "Eventually?" Meaning after I was dead or incapacitated. meaning once they'd managed to get control of my assets. Oh, I've made arrangements, I said casually. Updated my will recently, remember? Gerald helped me set up some trusts, establish clear distributions. Everything's taken care of. The way Kevin's jaw tightened was worth every sleepless night I'd had since discovering their betrayal. Later that night, through my bedroom window, I saw Kevin take out his phone and photograph something on the kitchen table, the bank statement, capturing evidence of assets he planned to steal. I texted Detective Thompson. They took the bait. Bank statement photographed. Her response? We're watching. 2 new credit applications filed today using your information. They're accelerating. Good, I typed back. Let them dig deeper. The following days were a masterclass in fraud documentation. Emily and Kevin became bold, almost reckless. They started talking openly about when we sell the house, as if it were a foregone conclusion. Kevin mentioned looking at condos in Miami. Emily talked about finally taking that European vacation she'd always wanted, all on my dime. Or so they thought. I played my part perfectly. Agreeable, slightly confused, mentioning more than once that I was feeling tired lately and having trouble keeping track of things. I'd leave my reading glasses in the wrong room, pretend to forget what day it was. Small things that could be used to support a case of declining mental capacity. Kevin ate it up. You know, Richard, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Lots of people need help as they get older. That's what family's for. Family? The word tasted like ash. You're probably right, I said, injecting just the right amount of uncertainty into my voice. Maybe I do need more help. The gleam in his eyes was predatory. He thought he was winning. A week after Emily got her phone back, Detective Thompson called. Richard, they've filed 4 more credit applications. Total exposure, if approved, is now over $75,000. Plus, they've initiated the refinancing paperwork on your house using forged documents. How much longer? I asked. Gerald thinks we have enough now, but he wants to wait for one more thing. He has a theory about their next move. Gerald's theory proved correct 3 days later. The letter came from Johnson & Associates, a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a petition for guardianship, filed by Emily Foster and Kevin Larson, claiming that I, Richard Foster, was no longer mentally competent to manage my own affairs due to demonstrated confusion, memory loss, and inability to make sound financial decisions. They were trying to have me declared incompetent. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Emily had sat as a child doing homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and read their legal attempt to strip me of my autonomy. The petitioner has witnessed increasingly concerning behavior, including forgetting important dates, misplacing important documents, and making statements suggesting disorientation and confusion, the document stated. They'd been documenting my performance. Every time I'd pretended to be confused, every deliberately misplaced item, every senior moment I'd faked, they'd recorded it as evidence. For a moment, I almost admired their thoroughness. Almost. Then I called Gerald. They filed for guardianship, I said. There was a pause. Then, that's it. That's what I was waiting for. Richard, do you know what this means? Tell me. It means they're not just trying to steal from you. They're trying to take everything, your autonomy, your assets, your very right to make decisions about your own life. It's not just fraud anymore. It's exploitation of an elderly person, attempted coercion, abuse of process. His voice held barely contained satisfaction. This gives us everything we need. And more importantly, the court date for the guardianship hearing is the perfect venue for our counterattack. When? 2 weeks? But Richard, this is it. No more pretending after this. At that hearing, we show every card. Are you ready? I looked around my kitchen, at the home I'd built, at the life they'd tried to steal. I've been ready, I said. The next 2 weeks were a strange limbo. Emily and Kevin walked around the house with barely contained excitement, believing victory was within reach. I continued my performance as the declining father, but beneath it, I was preparing for war. Kevin became openly dismissive. At dinner one night, he barely looked up from his phone when I spoke. Kevin, could you pass the salt? Oh, sure. He slid it across the table without glancing at me. Emily and I were thinking, Richard, this house is really too much for you. All these stairs, the yard work. After the hearing, we should look at some nice retirement communities. Places with activities, meals provided. You'd probably be happier. The hearing, I kept my voice mild, confused. Emily jumped in, all false sweetness. The guardianship hearing, Dad. Remember? We explained this. We're just trying to help you. Make sure you're taken care of. You've been so forgetful lately. Oh, right. I blinked slowly as if trying to remember. That's this week? 2 weeks, Kevin corrected with exaggerated patience. But don't worry about it. We've got everything handled. I bet they did. The following morning, I met with Gerald one last time before the hearing. His office conference room table was covered with documents, bank records, credit reports, phone logs, photographs, the complete evidence of Emily and Kevin's fraud. This is ironclad, Gerald said, tapping the stack of papers. Identity theft, financial fraud, forging documents, exploitation of the elderly, and now attempted coercion through fraudulent guardianship claims. The prosecutor is very interested. Will they go to jail? I asked. Kevin, almost certainly. Emily, he hesitated. She's your daughter. The court might be more lenient, especially if she cooperates and testifies that Kevin was the primary instigator. She wasn't coerced, I said flatly. I saw those text messages. She called me the old man. She was right there planning how to sell my house. I know. But legally, there's often a difference in sentencing between the mastermind and the accomplice. He looked at me carefully. Richard, I need to ask. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we walk into that courtroom, there's no going back. Your daughter will likely have a criminal record. Your relationship with her will be permanently destroyed. I thought about Emily at 7, showing me the fish she'd caught. Emily at 18, hugging me at her graduation. Emily at 25, walking down the aisle. Then I thought about the old man, and he won't notice, and 2 more months until we sell the house. She destroyed the relationship, I said. I'm just making it official. The day before the hearing, something unexpected happened. I came home from the grocery store to find Kevin in my study, again. But this time he wasn't hiding. He was openly going through my desk drawers. Looking for something? I asked from the doorway. He didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. Just trying to get organized. You know, get a sense of all your affairs before the hearing. Want to make sure we have a complete picture. Of course. I set down my grocery bags. Find anything interesting? Just the usual. Bills, statements, insurance policies. He paused. You know, Richard, this would all be easier if you'd just cooperate. Sign some papers. Give us power of attorney now. Save everyone the hassle of a court hearing. It was so brazen it actually took my breath away. He wasn't even pretending anymore. I'll wait for the hearing, I said quietly. His expression hardened. Your choice. But the judge is going to see what everyone else sees. An old man who can't take care of himself anymore. It's actually sad, watching you deteriorate like this. Every word was calculated to hurt, to make me feel small and helpless and defeated. Maybe you're right, I said, and walked away, before I said something that would blow the whole plan. I called Detective Thompson immediately. He was in my study. Going through my desk, he practically threatened me. Did you record it? No, Then I remembered. Gerald had suggested I install security cameras weeks ago. Wait. Actually, yes. The cameras. Perfect. Send me the footage. That's attempted intimidation of a witness. Just adds to the pile. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was the hearing. Tomorrow, everything would come out. Emily and Kevin would realize they'd been caught, that their plan had failed, that I'd known all along. Tomorrow, I'd have to watch my daughter face criminal charges. Around 3 a.m., I got up and walked through the house one last time. This house where I'd raised Emily after her mother died, where I'd bandaged her scrapes and helped with her homework and taught her to be honest, to work hard, to treat people with respect. Somewhere along the way, I'd failed, or she'd failed herself, maybe both. At 7 a.m., I put on my best suit. The navy one I'd worn to Emily's wedding. It still fit, if a bit looser than before. I'd lost weight these past weeks. Emily and Kevin came downstairs around 8, also dressed formally. Emily wore a conservative dress and heels, her hair pulled back. Kevin had on a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, bought with my stolen money, no doubt. Ready, Dad? Emily asked, and her smile was so practiced, so false, it made my stomach turn. Ready, I confirmed. The courthouse was downtown, a 20-minute drive. We took separate cars, they insisted, saying they had errands to run after. More likely, they wanted to celebrate their impending victory without me around. In the parking garage, I met Gerald. He looked sharp in his lawyer's suit, briefcase in hand. "Everyone's in place," he said quietly. "Thompson, the prosecutor, the bank representatives, and Richard, they have no idea what's coming. As far as Emily and Kevin know, this is just a simple guardianship hearing." "Good," I said. We walked into the courthouse together. Emily and Kevin were already there, standing with their lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school and probably had no idea he was representing two criminals. Emily waved at me. "Dad, over here." I walked over slowly, playing my part one last time. "Are you nervous?" she asked, taking my arm like a concerned daughter. "Don't worry. This will all be over soon." She had no idea how right she was. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lighting, rows of benches that had probably seen decades of family dramas play out. Emily and Kevin sat at one table with their young lawyer, who kept shuffling papers nervously. I sat at another table with Gerald, who looked calm and collected. But what Emily and Kevin didn't notice, what they couldn't see from their angle, were the other people in the room. Detective Thompson sat in the back row, arms crossed. Next to her was a man in a suit I recognized from the bank fraud investigation, and near the door a woman with a briefcase marked State Attorney's Office. The judge entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, named Judge Patricia Morrison, and we all stood. "Please be seated," she said, settling into her chair and reviewing the papers before her. "This is a hearing regarding a petition for guardianship filed by Emily Foster and Kevin Larson concerning Richard Foster. However," she looked up, her gaze sharp, "before we address the guardianship petition, the court has been made aware of other matters that must be addressed first." I watched Emily's face. The first flicker of confusion crossed her features. Kevin leaned toward their lawyer, whispering urgently. "Would the state attorney please approach?" Judge Morrison said. The woman with the briefcase stood and walked forward. "Your Honor, the state has filed criminal charges against Emily Foster and Kevin Larson that directly relate to this guardianship petition." Emily's face went white, not pale, white like someone had drained every drop of blood from her body. Her hand flew to her mouth. Kevin shot to his feet. "What? This is a guardianship hearing. We're not—" "Mr. Larson, sit down," the judge said sharply. "You'll have your opportunity to speak." The prosecutor opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Your Honor, the defendants are charged with identity theft, financial fraud, forgery, and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. These charges stem from a systematic scheme to defraud Mr. Richard Foster of his assets, which directly contradicts their claim in this guardianship petition that they're acting in his best interests." Emily's lawyer looked like he'd been hit with a brick. He turned to Emily and Kevin, his face a mixture of shock and anger. Clearly they hadn't mentioned any of this to him. "The evidence, Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, and I watched as she laid it all out. The printouts from Emily's phone that Daniel had preserved, the forged credit applications, the bank statements showing fraudulent accounts, the text messages, all of them displayed on a projector for the whole courtroom to see. The old man won't notice. Just 2 more months, and we sell the house. He's too trusting to catch on. Each message appeared on the screen, and I watched Emily shrink in her chair. She couldn't look at me. Kevin's face had gone from white to red, a vein pulsing in his temple. "Additionally," the prosecutor said, "we have evidence of attempted intimidation." She played the security footage from my study, Kevin going through my desk, his threatening words about it being sad, watching me deteriorate. The judge's expression grew colder with each piece of evidence. "Mr. Foster," she addressed me directly, "did you give permission for any of these credit applications, loans, or financial transactions?" "No, Your Honor," I said clearly. "I had no knowledge of them until my friend Daniel discovered evidence on my daughter's phone while repairing it." "And this guardianship petition, were you aware they intended to file it?" "I received notice, yes. But, Your Honor, I'm of sound mind and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. In fact, I've recently worked with my attorney to update my estate plan, establish proper asset protection, and ensure my finances are secure." I paused. The timing of this guardianship petition, coming right after they discovered I was protecting my assets, seems rather convenient. Judge Morrison turned to Emily and Kevin. Do you wish to respond to these charges? Their lawyer stood shakily. Your Honor, I was not made aware of any criminal investigation. I was retained solely to file a guardianship petition based on my client's stated concerns about Mr. Foster's mental capacity. If there are criminal charges, I need time to... Your clients lied to you, the judge interrupted, just as they lied to Mr. Foster and attempted to lie to this court. She looked at the prosecutor. I'm dismissing the guardianship petition immediately. As for the criminal charges, what is the state requesting? Immediate arrest, Your Honor. We have flight risk concerns given the nature of the charges and the substantial financial fraud involved. That's when Kevin lost it. This is insane, he jumped up, pointing at me. He's the one who's confused. He's been forgetting things, leaving important documents around, can't keep track of dates. We have evidence. Evidence you manufactured, Gerald said calmly, standing. My client deliberately played confused to document your reactions and build a pattern of your fraudulent behavior. Every forgetful moment was an act, Mr. Larson, one that you fell for completely. The realization hit Kevin like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. He turned to look at me, really look at me, and I saw the exact moment he understood. I met his gaze steadily and allowed myself a small smile. You knew, he whispered. You knew the whole time. Oh, I knew quite a bit, Kevin, I said. For instance, I knew that identity theft in Florida is a third-degree felony, up to 5 years in prison. Financial fraud adds another 5. Exploitation of the elderly, that's particularly serious. And attempting to fraudulently declare someone incompetent to steal their assets? I shook my head. Judges really don't like that. Emily started crying. Not pretty tears, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Dad, please, I'm sorry. We didn't mean... You called me the old man, I said quietly. You photographed my documents. You forged my signature. You planned to sell my house. You tried to declare me incompetent. Each sentence landed like a hammer blow. You meant every bit of it, Emily. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Bailiff, please take the defendants into custody. Mr. Foster, Mr. Morris, thank you for your cooperation with this investigation. This court stands adjourned. 2 bailiffs moved forward. Kevin tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. They cuffed him, and his face, the arrogant, condescending expression I'd endured for years, crumbled into something desperate and afraid. Emily turned to me one last time as they led her away. Daddy, please! But I'd already turned away. The criminal trial took 3 months. Gerald kept me updated throughout. Though I didn't attend most of it, I'd said my piece, given my testimony, and had no desire to watch the slow grinding of justice. But I was there for the sentencing. Kevin got 4 years in state prison. The judge cited the calculated, systematic nature of the fraud and his attempts to intimidate the victim. He also owed $50,000 in restitution, money he'd never have, which meant his wages would be garnished for years after his release. Emily, because she cooperated with prosecutors and because the judge believed Kevin had been the primary instigator, got 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a no-contact order. She was forbidden from contacting me in any way for the duration of her probation. She cried during sentencing. Kevin shouted about injustice and how I'd tricked them. The judge was unmoved, but the criminal case was only part of it. Gerald filed a civil suit for emotional distress, attempted theft, and fraud. The civil court was even less sympathetic than the criminal one. The judge awarded me $200,000 in damages. But here's the beautiful part, Gerald told me afterward, unable to hide his satisfaction. Remember that $180,000 account you showed them? The one Kevin photographed? The bait, I said. Exactly. When they tried to use that information to apply for more credit, it triggered fraud alerts we'd set up with the bank. All their accounts, their real accounts, were frozen pending investigation. They lost access to everything. Their checking accounts, savings, credit cards, all of it locked down. How much did they lose? About $15,000 of their own money, plus they're now responsible for all the debt they created in your name. The court ruled that since they used the fraudulently obtained money, they have to repay it. That's another $75,000 in debt they're personally liable for. I did the math. Between restitution, civil damages, and debt repayment, Emily and Kevin owed nearly $350,000, money they'd never have. They'd tried to steal my life savings and ended up destroying their own financial future instead. There was a certain elegant justice to it, like a perfectly balanced ledger. I stood on the courthouse steps after the final hearing, watching as they led Kevin away to begin his sentence. Emily stood apart, her lawyer talking to her in low tones. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Detective Thompson approached me. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it carefully. "You know, Detective, I thought I'd feel more triumphant, victorious, but mostly I just feel tired and sad. That was my daughter. I raised her, and she looked at me and saw nothing but a source of money." "You did the right thing," Thompson said firmly. "What they did was criminal, and if you hadn't stopped them, they would have destroyed you financially, and possibly had you declared incompetent. You'd have lost everything." "I know." I watched Emily get into a car with her lawyer. "Doesn't make it hurt less." "No?" Thompson agreed. "I don't suppose it does." A month later, I put the house on the market. It sold in 2 weeks. Orlando real estate was hot, and the location was prime. I made a good profit, even after agent fees and closing costs. I bought a 2-bedroom condo on the 8th floor of a building overlooking Lake Eola. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a balcony where I could watch the sunset, a community that had activities if I wanted them, and privacy if I didn't. It was exactly what I needed. Daniel helped me move. We'd become closer through all this. He'd been there from the beginning, the one who discovered the truth and helped me build my case. "You doing okay?" he asked, helping me unpack boxes in the kitchen. "Better than expected," I admitted. "I thought leaving the house would be harder. All those memories." "Sometimes memories can be heavy," Daniel said. "Better to start fresh." We finished unpacking and ordered pizza. Sat on my new balcony watching the city lights come on as the sun went down. "You ever hear from Emily?" Daniel asked carefully. "No. The no-contact order, remember? Even if it wasn't there." I shook my head. I don't know what I'd say to her. What she did destroyed any trust I had left? "That's fair." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. "You know what the weird thing is," I said eventually. "I spent 40 years as an accountant. My whole career was about balance, making sure the debits matched the credits, ensuring everything added up correctly. And in the end, that's exactly what this was. They took from me. Now they're paying back. The books are balanced." Daniel raised his beer can in a small salute. "To balance books?" "To balance books," I echoed. Life settled into a new rhythm. I joined the condo's book club, started going to the community gym in the mornings, made friends with my neighbors, retirees like me, people who'd lived full lives and were now enjoying the peace they'd earned. Sometimes I thought about Emily, wondered how she was doing, if the community service was teaching her anything, if she felt any genuine remorse. But mostly I tried not to think about her at all. One evening, 6 months after everything ended, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the lake orange and gold. 67 years old, alone, yes, but free, independent, with my dignity intact and my finances secure. I'd lost my daughter, but I'd kept myself, and if 40 years of accounting had taught me anything, it was that sometimes the most important thing wasn't what you gained, but what you refused to lose. The books were balanced, justice had been served, and that, I decided, was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.